My name's Alex, and if you told me that the lakeside cabin my grandfather built with his own hands would become the center of a battle with a power-hungry HOA president, I wouldn't have believed it. But here I am, defending my family's legacy from someone who thinks she can steal it for her own gain. Before we dive into this intense story, we have a small favor to ask. Drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. It's always incredible to see how far our stories reach. Thank you so much. Now let's dive in. Dive. Our cabin by Clearhaven Lake has been in my family for more than 6 decades. Built by my grandfather in 1961, it's more than just a structure. It's the heart of everything my family stands for. A small, cozy wooden retreat with a wraparound porch, a stone fireplace, and a dock that stretches into the water like an invitation to peace and serenity. Every summer, we'd gather here as a family, my parents, cousins, grandparents, cooking meals together, fishing at dawn, and stargazing by the fire at night. We never let the place fall into neglect. Every fallen tree limb was cleared, the wildflowers around the cabin were replanted every spring, and we made sure the lake stayed clean and thriving. After my parents passed away 2 years ago, the cabin came to me. At first, I wasn't sure what to do with it. The grief made it hard to visit, knowing they wouldn't be there waiting on the porch with coffee in hand. But after some time, I realized that letting the cabin sit unused was the last thing my parents would have wanted. I started coming back more often, spending weekends fixing up the place. The roof needed some work, the dock had seen better days, and the wildflowers were starting to thin out. I poured my time and energy into restoring it, keeping it exactly as my parents and grandparents had loved it. And then I had an idea, one that felt like the perfect way to honor my family's legacy while breathing new life into the place. There were natural geothermal springs on the property, something my grandfather had always marveled at but never fully developed. I wanted to create a small, rustic hot spring retreat right next to the lake. Nothing flashy or commercial, just a peaceful spot where people could come to relax, unplug, and appreciate nature. The plan was to keep it simple and eco-friendly, ensuring that the land and the lake remained undisturbed. I started drawing up plans and consulting with architects who understood the importance of minimal environmental impact. The project was coming together, and for the first time since my parents' passing, I felt like I was truly carrying their legacy forward. I could imagine families visiting the hot spring retreat and leaving with the same sense of peace and connection that my family had always felt here. But that's when Karen entered the picture. Karen wasn't just any HOA member. She was the president of the Silver Shores Homeowners Association, a nearby development that had been encroaching on the Lakeside area for years. Karen was known for her over-the-top community improvement projects, which usually benefited her more than anyone else. And when she learned about my plans for the cabin, she saw an opportunity, but not for me. One morning, I pulled into the gravel driveway of the cabin, expecting a peaceful weekend of restoration and planning. Instead, I found a woman in a tailored blazer standing on my porch, clipboard in hand, surveying the cabin like she was already imagining it as her own. Behind her, a small group of contractors stood around, nodding as she gestured to the surrounding area. I parked my truck and approached her, my heart pounding. "Can I help you?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Karen turned around, flashing a smile that was more smug than friendly. "Oh, Alex, I'm so glad you're here. I was just showing the contractors the property. You know, for the new development plans." "What plans?" I asked, suspicion prickling at the back of my neck. She tilted her head as if I'd just asked her something obvious. "For the hot spring spa, of course. I've been working on this for months. We're going to transform this place into a luxury retreat. Private hot spring baths, a lakeside lounge, a fine dining restaurant. It's exactly what the community needs." I stared at her, struggling to process what she was saying. "Karen, this is my family's cabin. You can't just walk in here and decide to turn it into a luxury spa." Her smile didn't falter. "Oh, Alex, you don't have to worry about that. The HOA already approved the initial plans, and I've spoken to the county about rezoning the area. We're going to make you an offer you won't be able to refuse." That's not happening, I said firmly. This land isn't for sale. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat by the fireplace, staring at the flames as they flickered and cracked. My mind kept replaying the scene from earlier. The contractors, Karen's smug grin, and her declaration that my family's land was part of her vision. The audacity of it all made my blood boil. I grabbed my phone and called my cousin Jake. He was more than family. He was the guy I always turned to when things got messy. As a lawyer specializing in property disputes, he'd seen more than his share of HOA conflicts. "She's trying to steamroll me, Jake," I said, pacing the living room. "She's already got contractors staking out the land, and she's talking about rezoning. She thinks she's untouchable." Jake sighed on the other end of the line. "Typical HOA power move. They start by making it sound inevitable, like they've already won, so you'll feel pressured to give in. Don't fall for it." "I won't," I said, gripping the phone tighter. "But what do I do next? She said she's already gotten the county involved. First, we need to see how legit those rezoning claims are. I'll dig into the county records and see if anything's been filed. In the meantime, document everything, every conversation, every letter, every visit from her or her contractors. If she's overstepping her authority, we'll need proof." The next morning, I woke up determined to fight back. I spent the day installing security cameras around the cabin, just in case Karen or her contractors tried to pull any stunts while I wasn't there. One camera covered the driveway, another faced the dock, and two more were mounted on the porch to capture any activity near the front and back doors. By the time I finished, my phone buzzed with a text from Jake. "Just checked the county database. No approved rezoning yet. She's bluffing, at least for now." I exhaled, a wave of relief washing over me. But it was short-lived. Karen wasn't the type to give up easily. 3 days later, a letter arrived in my mailbox. It was from the Silver Shores HOA, signed by Karen herself. The letter was packed with legal jargon, but the message was clear. They claimed my family's property was within the HOA's jurisdiction due to recent community expansion efforts, and that any future development on the land would require HOA approval. Attached was a list of suggested improvements to bring the cabin up to community standards. These suggestions included everything from repainting the cabin in neutral tones to tearing down the old dock and replacing it with a modern one that matched the aesthetic of Silver Shores. It was laughable, really. They wanted to erase everything that made this place unique and turn it into another cookie-cutter vacation spot. But I wasn't laughing. I was furious. I drove to the HOA's office the next morning, the letter clenched in my hand. The building was as pretentious as I'd expected, polished floors, modern art on the walls, and a front desk staffed by a woman who barely looked up from her computer when I entered. "I need to speak to Karen," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. The receptionist sighed, as if I'd just interrupted something very important, and gestured toward a glass-walled conference room at the end of the hall. I could see Karen inside, sitting at a large table with a group of board members. She was laughing at something, completely at ease. When I stepped into the room, her smile faded, replaced by that all-too-familiar look of condescension. "Alex," she said, as if we were old friends, "I didn't expect to see you so soon." I tossed the letter onto the table in front of her. "What is this? You can't just decide that my cabin falls under your jurisdiction." Karen leaned back in her chair, folding her arms. "The expansion was approved by the HOA board, and we've been working with the county to finalize the details. It's a formality at this point." "No, it's not," I shot back. "There's nothing on record about any official expansion. My property has never been part of your HOA, and you don't get to change that just because you want to build your spa." Karen's eyes narrowed slightly, but her smile didn't waver. "Alex, I understand that this is an emotional issue for you, but the fact is, this area is growing, and the community needs amenities that reflect that growth. A luxury hot spring spa would benefit everyone." "No," I said firmly. "It would benefit you." For a moment, the mask slipped, and I saw a flash of annoyance cross her face. But she quickly recovered, tapping her fingers lightly on the table. "Let me make this easy for you. We're prepared to offer you a generous buyout, enough to cover the cabin's market value and more. You could start fresh somewhere else, and we could take care of all the headaches that come with maintaining an old property." I almost laughed. This isn't about money, Karen. This is my family's legacy. I'm not selling and I'm not letting you take it. She sighed, as if I were a child refusing to share a toy. I was hoping we could resolve this amicably, but if you're going to be difficult, the HOA has other options. We're well within our rights to issue fines for non-compliance with community standards. Those fines can add up quickly, Alex. Are you sure you want to go down that road? Her threat hung in the air, but I wasn't intimidated. Do what you need to do, I said, but don't expect me to roll over. This cabin isn't going anywhere. As I left the office, I could feel her eyes on me, calculating her next move. She thought she had the upper hand, but what she didn't realize was that I wasn't fighting alone. With Jake's legal expertise and my determination to protect the cabin, I was ready for whatever she threw at me. One morning, I woke up to the sound of voices outside the cabin. When I stepped onto the porch, I saw a group of workers unloading equipment near the dock. At the center of it all was Karen, directing them like she was running the show. I marched over, my heart pounding with rage. "What the hell are you doing?" She turned to me, unfazed. "Preliminary inspections for the spa construction. We need to make sure the land is stable." "You're trespassing," I said, my voice cold. Karen shrugged. "It's all part of the community development plan." But she had underestimated me. I pulled out my phone and snapped photos of the workers, the equipment, and Karen herself. "You've just crossed a line," I said. "I hope you're ready to explain this to the sheriff." Karen smirked, clearly unfazed by my threat to call the sheriff. But she had underestimated me, and she was about to realize that pushing me too far was a mistake. I felt my blood boiling as I watched her contractors stomp around the property like they owned the place. My fists clenched at my sides as I stormed back to the cabin. I wasn't just going to stand there and wait for someone else to save me. I was done being polite. Inside, I whistled sharply, and within seconds, Bear, my loyal German shepherd, came trotting into the living room. His ears perked up, sensing the tension in the air. "Let's give them a proper welcome," I muttered, patting him on the side. He let out a soft growl, as if he knew exactly what was going on. I grabbed my shotgun from the gun rack near the door. It wasn't loaded, but Karen and her crew didn't need to know that. Just the sight of it would be enough to get their attention. Slinging it over my shoulder, I walked out onto the porch with Bear at my side, his fur bristling. When Karen spotted me, her confident smile faltered for the first time. I raised the shotgun just enough to make a statement, resting it casually in my hands. "You've crossed a line," I said, my voice loud and steady. "You've ignored my warnings, trespassed on my land, and brought a crew of contractors to tear apart something you have no right to touch." Karen took a step back, her eyes flicking between the shotgun and Bear, who was now baring his teeth. "Alex, there's no need to escalate this," she said, her voice wavering slightly. "This isn't escalation," I said coldly. "This is me defending my family's home. You and your crew have two options: pack up and leave, or I'll let the sheriff sort this out. Either way, you're done here." Bear let out a low growl, and one of the contractors dropped his clipboard, scrambling toward the truck. Another muttered something about not getting paid enough for this, and within moments they were packing up their equipment faster than I'd ever seen. Karen stood there for a moment, her face flushed with anger and embarrassment. "You're making a mistake," she said, her voice dripping with venom. "You're going to regret this." I lowered the shotgun slightly, but kept my eyes locked on hers. "No, Karen, the only mistake here is you thinking you could take something that doesn't belong to you." With that, she turned on her heel and stormed toward her car. As her tires kicked up gravel and disappeared down the road, I finally let out a breath, my pulse still racing. I knelt down and ruffled Bear's fur, whispering, "Good boy." But this wasn't over. I knew Karen wasn't the type to give up easily, and I'd just embarrassed her in front of her crew. She'd be back, and the next time she'd be coming for more than just intimidation. I needed to be ready. I should have seen it coming, but I didn't expect her to go this far. I thought the legal victory would be the end of it. Karen had been humiliated in court, stripped of her authority, and hit with fines and restitution. But that wasn't enough for someone like her. Karen wasn't the type to bow out quietly. I should have seen it coming, but I didn't expect her to go this far. That night, I was sitting on the porch nursing a cold beer with Bear lying at my feet. The cool breeze coming off the lake was soothing, and for the first time in weeks, I felt like things were settling down. I had the cabin to myself, the stars overhead, and the sound of crickets filling the air. But peace doesn't last long when someone like Karen is involved. It was just after midnight when Bear's ears perked up. He lifted his head, a low growl rumbling in his throat. I sat up listening. At first I didn't hear anything, but then, there it was, the crunch of gravel under tires. Headlights flickered through the trees as a truck approached the cabin, its engine rumbling low like it didn't want to be heard. I stood up, setting my beer on the porch railing, and whistled for Bear to stay by my side. The truck pulled up at the edge of the property, and 4 men jumped out, dressed in dark clothes and ski masks. My pulse quickened as I watched them fan out, heading straight for the cabin. "Stay close, Bear," I whispered, grabbing my shotgun from where I had leaned it by the door. It was loaded this time. One of the men circled toward the back of the cabin, while the others approached the front porch. I stepped inside, locking the door behind me and checking the windows. Through the security cameras on my phone, I could see them clearly now, flashlights in hand, tools slung over their shoulders. They weren't just here to scare me, they were here to do damage. The first sound was the crash of breaking glass as one of them hurled a rock through the living room window. I heard their muffled laughter, followed by the sound of spray paint cans shaking. My stomach twisted as I realized what they were about to do. I crept to the window and peeked outside, my heart racing. 2 of them were spray painting the side of the cabin, scrawling obscenities and threats in bold red letters. "Get out or we'll burn it down." On the other side of the cabin, another man was ripping down the wildflowers my mother had planted, tearing them from the soil and stomping on them like they were weeds. One of the masked men grabbed an old lantern off the porch and threw it against the wall, the glass shattering into pieces. Inside, my hands were trembling with a mix of rage and adrenaline. This wasn't just vandalism, this was personal. They weren't here for the cabin, they were here to destroy everything my family had built. Bear growled again, his body tense and ready. I knew I couldn't wait much longer. If they thought they could intimidate me into backing down, they were about to learn how wrong they were. I flung the door open, shotgun in hand, and stepped out onto the porch, aiming the barrel into the air. "That's enough!" I roared, my voice cutting through the night like a gunshot. "Get the hell off my property before you regret it!" The men froze, their flashlights flicking toward me. One of them, taller and stockier than the others, took a step forward, clearly trying to size me up. "You don't want to do this, man," he said, his voice muffled through the mask. "We're just here to send a message." I cocked the shotgun, the click echoing in the silence. "Consider the message received. Now leave, or I call the sheriff and let him deal with you." Bear let out a vicious bark, lunging forward just enough to make them reconsider their options. The man hesitated, then signaled to the others. "Let's go," he muttered, backing away. But as they turned toward the truck, one of them couldn't resist a final act of defiance. He lit a small Molotov cocktail, a glass bottle filled with gasoline and a rag stuffed in the top, and hurled it toward the front porch. The bottle shattered against the steps, flames licking at the wood. My heart stopped for a split second. The cabin. My parents' cabin. Without thinking, I ran to the porch, grabbing the fire extinguisher I had stashed just inside the door. Bear stayed at my side, barking furiously as I sprayed the flames, smothering them before they could spread. Smoke filled the air, but the fire was out within seconds. By the time I looked up, the truck was speeding down the road, its taillights disappearing into the darkness. I didn't waste any time. I called Sheriff Daniels, my voice shaking with adrenaline as I explained what had just happened. "They tried to burn the place down, Sheriff. I've got security footage of the whole thing." "I'm on my way," Daniels said. "Stay put and keep that dog of yours close." I hung up and walked around the cabin, surveying the damage. The spray-painted threats, the shattered window, the torn-up flowers. It was a deliberate attack meant to break me down. But as I stood there, breathing heavily with Bear at my side, I realized something. They hadn't broken me. If anything, they'd made me more determined. Sheriff Daniels arrived within 20 minutes, his cruiser's lights flashing as he pulled into the driveway. He stepped out, taking one look at the vandalized cabin and shaking his head. Damn, he muttered. Looks like they meant business. They did, I replied, showing him the security footage on my phone. The footage clearly showed the men arriving, smashing windows, and spray-painting threats on the walls. Daniels nodded grimly as he watched, then paused when one of the men briefly lifted his mask to wipe his face. "Got him?" Daniels said, zooming in on the frame. "That's Joe Simmons, known troublemaker. We've picked him up for vandalism before. If he's involved, the rest of them won't be hard to track down." "What about Karen?" I asked. "You think she sent them?" Daniels sighed. "We'll find out. If we can tie her to this, she's done." Within 48 hours, the sheriff's office had tracked down the men involved. Under pressure, one of them confessed that Karen had paid them to scare me into selling. She hadn't expected them to get caught, and she definitely hadn't expected them to turn on her. Karen was arrested for conspiracy, harassment, and attempted arson. The charges hit the local news, and the once proud HOA president found herself facing public disgrace and criminal charges. The fallout was swift. Her luxury hot spring spa dream was dead, and any hopes of reviving her influence in the community were gone. As for me, I spent the next few weeks repairing the damage. The wildflowers were replanted, the window was replaced, and the spray-painted threats were scrubbed clean. Each nail I hammered and each coat of paint I applied felt like a victory. One evening, as the sun set over Clearhaven Lake, I sat on the porch with Bear at my feet and a glass of whiskey in hand. The cabin was safe. My family's legacy was intact. And Karen? She was just another memory, one I wouldn't be losing sleep over anytime soon.